And Judge Specia, before you get started, thank you for being here. Just want it noted that I asked him to testify. I spent a fair amount of time talking with him when he was running the agency, and so I appreciate you being willing to be here.
Thank you, Representative Franks. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me here today. And I'd like to thank the work group for all the work they've done this summer. Obviously, there's been a great deal of work and time put into looking at this agency and looking to make this the best child protective service program in the nation. My name is John Specia. I'm a retired commissioner of the Department of Family and Protective Services. I'm a retired district court judge. Currently, I'm practicing law in San Antonio and consulting with the Alliance and other nonprofit organizations. When I started as commissioner, we were not a consolidated agency. And as I went through consolidation and the partial consolidation of the agency. I fully support House Bill 5. I support the intent of House Bill 5 to create a stronger, more responsive, agile, and better functioning Department of Family and Protective Services. The protection of vulnerable children who have been abused, neglected, and exploited is the highest duty of the state of Texas. Having the Department of Family and Protective Services Commissioner appointed and accountable directly to the governor reflects that priority. The agency must have adequate resources to fulfill its responsibility. It must have the administrative support to do its job. The commissioner must have the freedom to advocate for funding and resources outside of a consolidated budget. Both Dr. Janik, when I was commissioner, was very supportive of the agency, and Commissioner Cease and Commissioner Smith. However, in the future, we could not have the focus on this agency. And there was a disaster out in Arizona where CPS was part of a large consolidated agency, and they kind of lost track of the agency, and there were 6,000 cases that were not investigated. They changed their structure to put it under the governor. And so I think that's the appropriate structure for the Department of Family and Protective Services. Things are changing very, very fast. The commercial exploitation of children is a brand new area that the department needs to move into, and it's going to have to work very closely with the governor's office and with the legislature and to create programs for those children. One caveat, the children and families served by the Department of Family and Protective Services are a priority population for the for HHSC. I have not seen the committee substitute, but having those contracts and those relationships are essential to providing services to the family, Medicaid, special needs children, all the various programs. So it is a different agency than HHSC. It is a direct delivery agency providing services in 354 counties. Their contracts are different. Much smaller than the big contracts at HHSC, and I think this structure ensures that the services and that are provided by the Department of Family and Protective Services will always be the highest priority. Although the governor has been very involved in my appointment and Commissioner Whitman's appointment, a direct appointment gives this agency more prestige to do the incredibly important job it needs to do. And I'm available for questions.
Members, any questions?
And thank you for your testimony. Just so you know, the committee substitute makes it very clear that the department will basically contract for the consolidated services with HHSC and to make sure, because really many of the consolidations obviously made sense, and we're done for a very good reason. What we're talking about here is more of the management decision making, to streamline the management decision making, not as much the backroom operations, although some of them are included, some of them aren't. So with that in mind, would you talk from your experience in leading the agency about some of the decision making that perhaps you wanted to do in the best interest of kids that were slowed down, but also honestly talk about some of the improvements that were made with the consolidation, because it's both. We want to keep the good we want to keep the good parts, the parts that were done in SB 200, the parts that were done by Sunset. But we also want to draw a line in the sand and say this agency is now run, and here's who we're holding accountable for it.
I think the consolidation of IT functions was very, very important. those computers at HHSC and the Department of Family Protective Services need to talk to each other. We don't need two IT shops. We need one consolidated IT shop with very close communication and making sure the department gets the resources it needs. My concern was sometimes that we would be put on the back burner on IT projects because there was so much more going in HHSC. So I think that consolidation is good. I think all of the contracts being at HHSC is a little bit of a problem for the agency because the contracts are very different. The prevention projects are generally with very small nonprofits, and so we need to make sure that the rules are appropriate but flexible as it relates to making sure we can contract with smaller nonprofits in the community. I think that the commissioner needs a very strong legal department, and that general counsel needs to be under the direction of the commissioner of the Department of Family and Protective Services. My general counsel lived in my office, so we made decisions every day, all day long. There's a move to have the general counsel under the direct control of HHSC's general counsel. I think that's a mistake. I think it should go back under the agency. Government relations. I think the Department of Family and Protective Services is over here more during the interim and during the session talking about cases. That doesn't need to be at HHSC. That needs to be under the direction of the commissioner. The commissioner has to have a structure that supports quick decision making. And it frankly is just hard to have two bosses. The governor's always been the boss, but when you're hired and fired by the head of HHSC, you've got kind of mixed loyalties. I don't think the loyalty ought to be mixed. It ought to be directly to the governor. I don't know whether it's approval by the Senate or not in the substitute, but
It's in there. Right?
Yeah, well, I'll
I
find
don't
out.
know.
It's not specifically listed on the bill, but I believe any appointment by the governor
think so.
is. But we'll find out.
And I think that's important because then the person that's appointed will have the support of the Senate and will have been confirmed by the Senate. So this is the position that I fought for and kind of lost while I was in the agency. So I'm a very, very much of a fan of this. I think this agency should be standalone, should be on an equal basis to all the other state agencies that deal with children, and have a very, very close working relationships. I don't want to waste money and duplicate anything that can be done by contract with HHSC. Again, like IT is a good program. Probably the vast majority of procurement, but you've got to make sure you're dealing with the smaller contracts.
Can I just want to, just from a clarification standpoint, it's not really standalone because there are going to be a number of things that would remain consolidated. I think the standalone is, to your point, is being able to make decisions. You mentioned trying to get a small contract with a nonprofit to provide services. Can you relay why that might be a problem under the current structure?
My experience when I was commissioner was that we had some issues with the smaller prevention and early intervention contracts because they were completely reforming the entire procurement process, and they were kind of put on the back burner. A lot of stuff was on the back burner. I mean, redoing procurement is an enormous job, but there needs to be a sensitivity. You're not dealing with major hospitals, major nursing home corporations. You're dealing with very small nonprofits, and I think the procurement rules are probably gone a little bit too far in not recognizing that the best services for children oftentimes are in very small mom and pop kinds of organizations in West Texas and all over the state. So I think we need to have a procurement process that recognizes who we're dealing with. And frankly, one time we didn't get the contract signed and people were going to run out of money. Very small nonprofits, and it got taken care of. But the department needs to have a procurement and a contracting process that recognizes that sometimes you're dealing with big companies, but a lot of times you're dealing with smaller nonprofits for the direct services, drug testing, counseling, those kind of things for families.
Members, any other questions? Anybody else? Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.